What's up everybody, I am Jaspreet Singh and welcome to the Minority Mindset. Donald Trump has signed quite a few executive orders in his first few weeks as president. One of his executive orders is titled Reducing Regulation and Controlling Regulatory Costs, which is supposed to cut business regulation. Donald Trump's plan is that for every one new regulation passed, 2 should be removed. So, are business regulations good or bad? Well, it depends on who you ask. Let me break down how it works. Businesses are in the business of, well, selling things and making a profit. Sometimes the government feels that businesses need more checks and balances, so they create regulations to protect consumers. For example, after the financial collapse of 2008 and 2009, the government created a whole bunch of regulations to monitor how banks work. Why did the government get involved? Well, banks started loaning money to a lot of people. When the financial meltdown happened, a lot of these people lost their jobs, so they couldn't afford their loan payments, so banks weren't getting paid, and so they had no money to pay their employees. Some of these banks were so big that the government did not want to see them fail, so the government paid the banks to stay in business, and that's why the government started creating these regulations so they can monitor lending. These financial regulations to stop bad lending are known as Dodd-Frank, and it's one of the things that Donald Trump wants to get rid of. The government justified these regulations by saying it's their way of protecting themselves so they don't have to bail out big businesses again like they had to do in the last financial recession. It's a fair point, right? I mean, the government did have to pay a lot of money. This bailout wasn't cheap, and so they don't want it to happen again. Businesses argue that these regulations make them less competitive globally. More regulations mean higher costs of running a business, so if a company overseas can do the same thing cheaper, it hurts their competitiveness. Blah, 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 blah. Now that we're done with all this political talk, here's the truth about business regulations that no one talks about. The ideal goal with business regulation is to protect consumers from greedy business people. That's fair. I'm a business person and I understand businesses want to make a profit, but I still don't want to see businesses gouging customers because that hurts a consumer's likelihood to buy another product. The problem is a greedy business person isn't going to magically become ungreedy. A greedy business person isn't going to magically become less greedy just because the government added hurdles for them. It just means they're going to have to work a little bit harder to find ways to jump over the hurdles. It's very hard to completely stop frauds and scams from happening completely. There's bad people in the world. Some of them are rich, some of them are poor. The second issue is governments aren't really an unbiased source to write regulation. Big businesses spend a lot of money on lobbying, and when I say a lot of money, I mean a lot of money. In 2016 alone, big banks spent $60 million on lobbying. Now multiply that number by every other big industry. When big businesses lobby, they're essentially working with government officials to push laws and regulations in their favor. They essentially come and say something like, look, you don't want to hurt our business. We employ so many people and we pay you so much money in taxes. You don't want to lose that revenue, do you? So when it comes time to write regulation, these government officials have like this invisible hand hovering over them that tells them what to write. So while the goal is to protect consumers, the actual result isn't always what you and I expect. What has ended up happening in the past is that some of these regulations end up crushing small businesses because they can't keep up with the added regulations and costs. This then eliminates competition for big businesses, which gives them more of a monopoly and more power, which is exactly what we were trying to avoid. Take a look at this graph, which shows the number of small banks after Dodd-Frank was enacted. Now, take a look at this graph, which shows the number of big banks after Dodd-Frank was enacted. Now, there are 3 possible explanations for why there were less small banks and more big banks. 1, small banks couldn't survive after the recession. 2, all the small banks became the big banks. Or 3, the small banks couldn't keep up with the added costs of the Dodd-Frank regulations. We don't know what the exact explanation is for every bank, but we do know that these regulations do have an added cost. So how do we really fix this problem? Is it more regulation? Well, is it less regulation? There's really no one-size-fits-all solution to this issue because on one hand, we want to protect consumers, and on the other hand, we don't want to crush small businesses by over-regulating, and on the third hand, we don't want to give the government too many costs. In my opinion, the best solution is preventative care. How do you save money in medical bills? Eat clean and work out so you don't have to go to the doctor, so you can avoid the medical bills altogether. How do you protect consumers from fraud, over leverage, and business scams? Teach people about money, teach people about business, and teach people about debt. This way, when somebody making $35,000 a year gets approved for a $120,000 home with a 0% down payment because it gets rolled into the mortgage, they smell something fishy. 8 out of 10 Americans live in debt. That's 80% of the country, and 62% of people have less than $1,000 saved up for an emergency. The majority of people don't have basic financial skills. Why doesn't anybody teach us this? And guess what? Those statistics actually make big banks happy, because if people realize they can live without debt, well, banks don't spend $60 million a year on lobbying for nothing. They want to make sure they can keep loaning you as much money as possible, so this is exactly what they don't want you to know. So yeah, business regulation might help in some places, but it also hurts in others. The first solution to the problem should be financial education so consumers can protect themselves, but unfortunately, that doesn't align with government interests. What's up everybody? If you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up, and what are your thoughts on business regulation? Please let me know in the comments below. Don't miss our new videos on entrepreneurship, business, and money every single week. So hit the subscribe button below or hit this button right here even if you're on your phone. Follow me on Snapchat and follow us on Instagram over here, and check out some of our latest videos by clicking these buttons below. And as always, keep hustling.